Wilkinson and Son of London. Let's have a look over this beauty. On the back we have a horn heel plate with the 2 original screws. This obviously isn't original, but it's very nicely done nonetheless. A little interesting addition, you've got this little inlet here. Actually, where the pad isn't new, you've got a little inlet there, and that is actually made of a separate piece, but it's a lovely done job. Lovely walnut stock with fiddleback throughout. You have very nice tight flat point checkering and quite a deep grip actually for a gun of the era. Nice slug safety, double triggers, true 7-pin side lock there, the bar in action, retaining screws at the front, firing pin and retaining screws there as well. There's clearly been a lot of work done to this gun. Some of the screws are not original, some of them are, some are being re-blacked, re-blued, other bits have been touched up. If you look at the side of the lock plate here, you'll notice there's actually some bits that are probably where it was very rusted or pitted that have been cleaned out. The barrels are browned and of a very, very high quality Damascus, and the fore end is on a pull lever there. It is a semi-assisted opener, and it is very nice. It is very nice for what it is. Lovely little doll's head in the back there as well. Altogether, an absolute stunner. So to tell the story of Wilkinson, we first need to start with a man called Henry Knock. Henry Knock was a very famous gunmaker a few hundred years ago who was famed mostly that we'll know him today for his 7-barreled gun. They used to sell them to the government, actually deck clearers, and they were £13 each. Not that we're talking about Henry Knock today, so it's of fairly little importance. Knock had a man working for him for many years who ended up marrying Knock's adopted daughter, and this man's name was James Wilkinson. James worked his way up through Knock's company, eventually becoming foreman and general manager. He took over Knock's company in 1804 after Henry Knock's death. Although he wasn't as innovative as Henry Knock came out with some amazing designs, he was still a hell of a businessman. And he grew the business's reputation for best quality guns, and their sales increased. After Knock's death, he operated as James Wilkinson Gunmakers until 1824, when his son Henry joined the firm. Henry named after his late grandfather. Henry was much more of an inventor and innovator than his father, and much more like his grandfather before him, even though there were no blood relations. In fact, he worked with his contemporaries to make advancements in both sporting and military firearms. In fact, in 1832, he came out with one of the very first breech loading concepts. Essentially, it was a sliding tilt-up chamber that you could load instead of having to put it down the muzzle, close it down, and go forward. And so they had this sort of strange, almost self-contained-ish ammunition. Very smart. This really wasn't just in shotguns. In fact, it wasn't really in shotguns at all or rifles, but it was, in fact, in pistols more than anything. In fact, one such pistol was sold at auction about 5 years ago that I found that had a proper duck's bill effect scatter gun. Very clever. As with any maker of the time, they were not just a gun maker. In fact, they had a rather diverse business. Henry's main concern, other than guns, was sword making. In 1841, in fact, he employed someone called John Latham, who was a very, very accomplished swordsman. And they worked together not only to develop a well-built sword, but to create a very usable sword. Between Henry's technical knowledge and John Latham's practical knowledge, they made massive, massive advancements in their sword-making area. Unfortunately, in 1861, Henry died, and their business actually went to John Latham. The company went on to do great trade both domestically and abroad. And in fact, as you'll see from this trade label, I should say at this moment, this box isn't original, neither is the trade label, but some of the other bits are, that as you can see, to His Majesty, the King and Prince Royal of Persia and the Honourable East India Company. They did a lot of trade abroad and in fact were known for having shops all around the globe, or at least providing a vast array of accoutrements. You could buy just about anything you wanted from Wilkinson and Son, or as we would know him today, Wilkinson Sword. Anyway, back to this gun. This gun was delivered to its owner on the 27th of January 1904. And that first owner was Frederick Baumgardt Elmslie. Frederick Baumgardt Elmslie was born on the 18th of July 1855 and actually led a very interesting life, which I'm going to cover now because I generally found this man absolutely fascinating. He entered the army in 1875 and was promoted through the ranks, seeing service in the Afghan War, amongst others that we'll get onto. He was gazetted captain in 1884 and advanced to major in 1892. At that time he was actually assistant superintendent of the range at Shoebury in Essex. As you may have figured, he was actually a Royal Artillery man. He was quite the scientist and won many awards and medals for his essays on the subject of ballistics, shooting, field techniques and all that kind of thing. A very wise, very well-read man who did go on to do marvellous things. In fact, in 1898 he took command of the 37th Field Battery Royal Artillery and took them down to the Sudan. His time there started with a 1,200-mile trip from Cairo all the way down to Omdurman, which took well over a month. Obviously he had to take not just his men, but a hell of a load of guns as well. On arriving with his battery of 5-inch howitzers, they started the bombardment of Omdurman. In fact, slight interesting fact is this was the first use of high explosive shells. These shells weighed 50 pounds and were accurate well over 4,000 yards, which is, if you think about it, awesome given that we are in 1898. The explosive compound actually they used in them was something called lyddite, which worked very well. In fact, we would probably call it a high fragmentation shell, or a fragmentation shell today, as opposed to a high explosive. They had some issues with it, mostly that the lyddite reacted with the shell casing, and that was bad. So they actually had to paint coat the inside and paint coat the outside of the shells. However, they did a fairly good job of destroying a lot of Omdurman with them, so I think they were quite well received at the time. Over the next 15 or 20 years, however, they were replaced with something called shellite and TNT, and generally the high explosive shell was developed a lot more, obviously leading into World War I. During the Battle of Omdurman, Frederick Baumgardt Elmslie actually did serve with both Winston Churchill and Lord Kitchener, which, well, he mingled some big names, let's say that. With the victory in Sudan, he actually came home. The victory was obviously hard won, however, we did have machine guns and they didn't, which did help. He retired. He retired from the army in 1907. However, during World War I, he actually rejoined back up, and from 1916 to 1918, he was on active duty in France. He ended his career as a Brigadier General, and Brigadier General Elmslie passed away in 1936. And this gun stayed with him more than likely for the last 32 years of his life. It is a testament to history, the fact that it was held by such a great man. I mean, it was a fairly dark time in our history if you think about it from that perspective, but in reality, if this gun could tell stories, or if this gun could hear and retell the stories that it has heard, just wow. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Take care, goodbye, and we'll see you next time.